Let's dive into the discussions shaping the nation.
Thank the Minister for her statement this morning. As Fianna Fáil spokesperson for disability, I attended a fairly powerful workshop held by the Independent Living Movement Ireland and the Dublin City Council Public Participation Network. And there were adults of all ranges of impairment was the word that they used. And they spoke about three things. They spoke about their freedom to make decisions. They spoke about choice. And they also spoke about labels, and they spoke about being defined by a label. And each of them are people who have lived experiences of disabilities. Interestingly, when they spoke about freedom, they also spoke about the freedom to fail, their own freedom to make mistakes, as anybody has. And I suppose the difference is that for many of those people, we're talking to adults, but in the case of the assessment of needs, we're talking about children, and so all of those decisions fall on the carer of those children, and in most cases, it is the parents. And I suppose when you think about it, when disability is such a broad term, and often it has become focused very much in the space of neurodiversity, okay? But disability is a very broad term. So if somebody had a congenital physical defect when they're born, then the parents know from the first moments that they have challenges, that they need to have a treatment plan, that there needs to be a diagnosis, and the health services put in place measures to do that. The difficulty is that for some children, their disability is not as obvious. It often comes about as part of developmental checks, suspicions or concerns of parents, and then a referral to CAMS in some cases, or through the schools where teachers reinforce the concerns of parents. And I think that's one of the huge difficulties with the current model is that parents are just fighting for an intervention. What they want is not any technical document. What they want is a treatment pathway for their children who they know have needs. And often acknowledging the need in the first place is the first step. One parent said to me that the best and worst day they ever had was when their child received their diagnosis. Because at the very least, they knew that the scale of the challenge ahead, but they knew that the mountain they were climbing. And I think part of the debate around the assessments of need is it's the desire of parents to crystallise the diagnosis and to crystallise the need. And so I think part of, as we go forward in terms of, and I referenced the Taoiseach's comments earlier in regard to perhaps changing legislation and so on, we need to get back to a place where the diagnosis and the treatment pathway is the priority, not a technical document. And look, I say that with some experience, although without the permission to define anybody in my family publicly here. But I say it with some experience. And like, one of the issues we have to do is when people receive a diagnosis, often, there's different levels of literacy, digital literacy we talk about, but there are different levels of health literacy. And sometimes parents are given a diagnosis in the coldest and most clinical of language, and they've no real understanding of how they progress it. There isn't a continuum of care from the moment concerns are raised to when we diagnose a condition, to making an intervention, to putting in place a support at primary school or a preschool, to putting in place supports at primary school, despite there being lots of interventions available. And part of the difficulty we have, and I think one of the challenges you have, Minister, is putting in place a pathway that parents can easily understand, that they don't feel that they have to advocate at every level. But parents only advocate at every level when the services aren't readily available, and they're only advocate at every level when they don't feel that they're being listened to. So whether, regardless, and I've lots of comments around assessment of need, but one of the most startling was that a third of the therapist's time last year was taken up by assessments of needs. And look, as somebody who would like to see more, very directly like to see more treatments and therapies and interventions, I have to ask myself the question, what is the priority for the department? And so I ask, if we have a better pathway, if we have better line of sight for parents, if we listen to parents more and provide diagnosis, we will be able to provide that better pathway, and we will be able to provide a better experience for the people who have the disability.
Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.